So you just came up with an idea, and then we decided to start recording. You said you wanted to talk about the difference in what between dating and business. What was it?
Yeah, so what I'm like, we're both nerds on human communication and like what's going on inside in your brain, in your body when you are in front of people. And what we both noticed is that there is a lot of overlap between the use of the skills that are useful in dating when you're trying to attract a hot girl, or when you're trying to, let's say, communicate to your team or communicate to a potential like a potential business partner or raise funds. Like the way you talk, the way you communicate uh, essentially has a lot of overlaps in those two areas, whether it's the private relationships and public relationships, or more useful, let's say, business relationships. I would like to discuss what are the common things and where are the differences. And most importantly, how can working on one specific skill or tactic or strategy in one of these spheres transfer into another sphere. Because there is basically, in my opinion, there's kind of three major spheres of communication. One is the communication me to me, meaning the self-communication. Then there is me to someone that I'm interested in a familiar context, or in like a um, close relationship context, meaning I want to date this person, I want to be really friends with that person. And then there is like professional relationships, which are more about what can we do together, right? And yeah, I would like to discuss what are the similarities and differences between these different spheres.
Yeah. I have a similar thing. It's like world, communication with the world, communication with your inner circle, and then communication with self, right? It's the same thing. I really love the idea that communication is effective at different levels because of a number of different things, but they kind of, through all of the aspects, they share things in common. You're asking me a question about like the differences between dating and business, but I think I want to derail the conversation a little bit. I think the one of the biggest problems that guys come in when they do the live events with us, their communication with self is real trash, and they think that their communication with the other two levels is really good, but they're not. Like if they are not self aware, it's very difficult while they're monitoring that self thing to be aware of what's going on with the girl that's in front of them, or what's going on with the group in their public speaking in front of them. Like it's hard to be aware of an audience member when you can't even be aware of what you feel in your own self, right? Your emotional self-awareness is usually what, when we fix with the meditation stuff and the hypnosis stuff, it's usually the stuff that what do you call that, iterates through their whole life once they fix that core problem. And so I kind of want to throw it into a off the rails a little bit. Instead of like the differences between dating and business, I would say that the core problem is much more self-awareness. It's like the difference between how do I communicate, what words do I say, and how am I being perceived? How do I perceive myself in this moment? And how does the group perceive me? Like that awareness is what people, like the guys that come to the workshops and the guys that are on my calls every week, that self-awareness is what their problem is. Like they don't know what they feel about a subject, and then they're trying to project it onto somebody else. Like they're going to project the same confusion. And usually the ego gets in the way and tells them, "Oh no, man, you got this," but you don't got this. Everybody can tell, you know. Does that sound like uh, a decent idea?
Yeah, 100%. What this made me think of immediately is, so I'm going to go back to an NLP concept, which is called the meta model. And that is about the filters that you have between you and the world. So when you get an information from someone or even from yourself, it goes through three major filters, which is your reference structure, meaning how you perceive the experience. That's number one. People will perceive things differently. Your experience of the hot or the cold is different than mine. Your experience of spicy food, as we know, is very different than mine. I cannot stand spicy food. You can. We have a different perception of the experience. What you define as spicy is not the same as I define as spicy. That's probably
One of my clients sent me today a picture of one of the girls that he is currently sexually involved with, and he's like, "Yeah, she's like a 9," and I'm like, "I guess that's relative, man."
right. We have all a different perception of the experience, which has to do with the way our senses work. Well, like we are all sensitive in a different way, right? So when I tell you, for example, oh, like this is just like skiing down a hill. For me, it might be like a fun experience, and for you, it might be a traumatic experience because the only time you skied, you broke your leg, right? We will have just this way of perceiving thing. Did I just
You'll
hit?
never find me on a snowboard.
There we go.
Got
That's number one. Number two, we have the like the deep structure that's more in terms of how we function. It's our own programs that are built based on education, experience, and our, let's say, personalities, right? I know you'll go really deep into that rabbit hole, but like we have different parts. We can behave in different roles. We have integrated throughout our education to behave differently. So when we receive a message, and even when we say something to ourselves, it will hit at a different level based on like what let's say what parts of our brain is monitored. So for example, for me, if we're speaking about food, for example, and if you're telling me, yeah, like you don't control yourself very well with food, for someone, it will be like, no big deal. And for me, it hits to a part of like my childhood where that was a big deal. And like that immediately makes me feel a completely different way. And then you have a third way, which is like it's called the surface structure, meaning how you express things. That's the word. That's the linguistic part in the neurolinguistic programming. And that is the words that we use. The words that we use to represent things. And these lead to, just putting like a little framework on the conversation we'll have, and then we can go deep, to generalizations, distortions, and deletions of concepts. The problem with that, so now we have like, what is that? We can put that on the side for a little bit and just talk about how these filters affect let's say, the communication. But whatever you tell to yourself, whatever you feel, whatever you experience from the outside world is going to go through these filters. And it's going to like basically use these three words: either distort the reality, like twist it, like you're going to hear something and you're going to make it something completely different, or it's going to just generalize like, oh, I perceive that she didn't like this comment. Like I pushed her a little bit on, let's say, her personality. Like it's, oh, you're so obnoxious, and she didn't like that comment, and I'm gonna make it that she doesn't like me, right? It's gonna generalize into different things, or it's just gonna omit things, like completely forget about important aspects, like. The person has obviously, like many guys do that with me. They will start to talk and never finish, and I give them clear cues that this is enough. Like, I understood. You can move on to the next thing. I'm going to be like, yeah, I understood. Like, what about the next thing? And they just like, no, I have to explain you very well. And they're just over-focused on their experience of expression instead of communicating. Yeah. Right. So I wanted to bring these different concepts because I think expressing yourself is different than communicating. And I think these filters bring a completely personal experience, which goes back to your point, which is if you don't know yourself very well, you're unable to read what you're actually getting through these filters. If I know that I'm biased for certain experiences and that certain personality parts are taking over in certain situations, I can't adjust. That's our strength, probably, with experience. But most people, they think that the only thing that matters is the words they say and how the other person sees them, and they don't understand that they're not even able to see that properly without having like these filters in front of them.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like that whole thing. I think we should, on this particular podcast, we should probably break down one smaller thing. Otherwise, we're going to be sitting here talking for 2 hours. And so I think let's go with distortion and how the filter is how your belief systems and how your filters are working on screwing up the communication between you and let's say the second level, like you and somebody else, and then we can kind of drop the levels or whatever. I think that'll be interesting as we come up with stories and stuff that go along with it. Very often, guys will come into the dating workshops, right? And they will have an idea in their head, something like, okay, I want to bang a really hot chick, right? Or I want this girl to approve of me, right? And they're not taking into account, like, okay, what will happen if she does approve you? Uh, does your desire for sex have a structure underneath it? Can you trust yourself to take it from point A to point B, or do you just think that when she approves of you, it's all going to happen naturally? Or what do you think she's feeling, experiencing? Does she feel safe? Does she feel like you're fun? Does she want to go down this risky endeavor with you? Have you shown enough in that space? Like, you're not thinking about all that stuff. You're just thinking about, okay, well, if I talk in a certain way, the general woman will be sexually attracted to me, and she won't be able to stop herself from jumping my bones, right? I actually had a client who was like, he's like, I just want to know what to say so that she just wants to rip my clothes off. And I'm like, well, my friend, it does not exist. There are certain contexts that will maximize those things. For instance, let's say you're in a sex club in Berlin, right? And you're wearing the proper leather attire, and some woman has slotted you in her mind as favorable, the way you look, as something that she has experienced in the past, probably a fast track to what you're trying to get accomplished. But otherwise, there's no magic bullet pickup line that's going to ingratiate you, jump the trust thing, build all that stuff. And I bet that even if you walked up and said, you know what, we should totally make love, and she was like, yeah, let's go, you would probably self-sabotage right then because it's so foreign to you. So that's my kind of thoughts and what I've experienced. This guys have these myopic little categorical expectations that have no mapping on the real world, and as long as they stay in that, that's like saying, like, oh, if I leave a tooth under my pillow, I'm going to get money, and then the tooth fairy is going to come bring it to me, and that's just the way things work around here. It's like, yeah, okay, that might have been good when you were 5, but, like, apparently I fricked something in your...
This is already working. This is already working. This is exactly what we needed. Tooth analogies, fucking spicy foods. This is exactly what we needed. This is great. Yeah. I mean, correct. So, bottom line, the perception of self affects all your ability to communicate and relate to the world, as you were saying. Where can we take it from here? What would be like a takeaway point that we can generate from this?
Well, I think that when we're talking about distortion, and which is what I was trying to illustrate, whether you got that communication or not is a different thing. But we were talking about distortion. It's like guys will have these expectations, and a lot of them are given to them by media, TV, and social media, and they just like, oh, this is how things work. Hot girls love guys with money, so I'm going to go show how much money I have, and then the hot girls will want to come on my boat. It's like, if you talk to the hot girls who come on the boats, they're gonna tell you that they don't fuck most of those guys, right?
Yeah.
And
this is probably the best distortion example of a distortion, is to think that because the girls are with you or around you is because they like you. Like, this is like an inference of like, this means that is completely wrong. And I mean, we had so many clients that were hyper successful, hyper cool, were using their status to attract girls. And what does that attract? Girls that want someone with status, not the girl that is attracted by someone by status, a girl that wants someone with status. And the probability that this girl is actually attracted is very limited. It depends if you're good looking or not, basically. So you're like putting all the pressure on, like, you're going back to like the problem that the random guy is going to have on the street is, am I good looking or not? And that's the only way to attract girls, right? So this distortion here is, I have found a hack that attracts girls. This is not a hack to attract girls. It's a hack to get girls around you. Still not a hack to attract them. I like this. I like this example a lot because in the business context, it's the same thing. Like people think if I put systems in place to get people to come to my events and free stuff, or even in the networking space, like oh, I'm just gonna get investors around me, and if they stay around, and even if they invest, it's because they believe in my business, they like me, and people make these like these connections.
Manifest the funding.
Yeah, exactly. Not only will you manifest the funding, but sometimes when the funding comes, you need to keep in mind that some of these people invest in you because they know they can use you. Just like girls know they can use you for the status. People have self-interest, right? And until you build like a deep, I want to say real connection built through real communication, not like expression of value necessarily. Until you get to that point in both worlds, business and relationship, you haven't found someone that will stick around for the long term. You will just find people that are good to complement each other for their own selfish goals. Which some people will argue that everyone will always do that, and that's probably just because most connections or most relationships are like that. But that's not the case. At least there are examples where it's not the case, and I think everyone's goal is to like create something a little bit deeper, where you know that it's not only when you stop to be and like I don't want to say entirely useful because people will keep you around because you're useful, but your usefulness is defined based on strength that you always have, meaning you will always be useful for this person. That's what's interesting. Now I kind of went into like this is like I distorted the concept.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll give you a different example. I used to run a coaching company, and I had a bunch of coaches underneath me, and many of the coaches, because I seemed to be very successful at the time, it ended up not being so successful because of a number of market forces and COVID. But many of these guys would come in and they would be rah 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 all on the Duke team until it came to the point where they were supposed to do things that I told them to do, like make content on a regular basis and make sure their lighting is good for their camera angles and all this other stuff, because we were trying to make a big push on social media, on YouTube. And when I asked them to do the hard stuff, they would start to falter and they'd run into resistance. They didn't want to work through the resistance because all they wanted was to kind of ride the coattails of the fame so that they could be cooler, right? They didn't actually want to help guys. They didn't want to do what it took to create content that resonated with people. They wanted to be seen as somebody with a cool job, right? And so it started to fall apart because when they had to go do the hard work and the 18 hours of craziness of script writing and all the little idiosyncratic stuff that actually makes social media pop, makes you stand out, they balked at that. They wanted to just be like, oh, just told me what to say, da, 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 and then it would be kind of lifeless on the camera, right? And as soon as COVID hit and we were unable to do live events, these guys just poofed, right? They all disappeared. And they were not Team Duke anymore because their goals weren't being served anymore, right? Whereas on the flip side, you and I were working in a partnership together for early Limitless stuff. And you had to downscale the business quite a bit because COVID hit and live events started doing weird stuff and whatever. And we were building this massive coaching thing on your side where you were the big grand leader of everything. And then you had to cut a bunch of people and make sure the business would survive, right? When you had that conversation with me, I knew that you had my best interest at heart. Like, you liked me for who I was. You wanted me to be involved. We just couldn't find a way at the moment for us both to be involved and make a profit without changing things up quite a bit. And in that moment, because I'd been kind of screwed over by a bunch of other guys I worked for in the dating industry, I knew that I could count on you. I knew that you actually, even if you didn't see the next level clearly, because none of us could, we didn't know we were going to be locked down for 2 fucking years. I knew that you would have my best interest at heart and you weren't going to stab me in the back. Right. And the difference in the kind of the distortion in the meaning of the communication is my ego when I was running my company. was like, oh yeah, all these guys want to work for me. I'm such a badass. My vision is cool, and all my business acumen is great, and I'm gonna carry all these guys like a championing leader, and then make their lives much better as I keep moving forward and pushing with my tenacity. And my ego got hit in the face by the COVID-19 virus, and when I needed support to keep things running, they all poofed, and I was busy distorting my movement into coaching and having all these guys that were working with me. I was busy distorting that into some sort of worth of myself. And my real worth, that what I got out of running that company and eventually closing it down, was that I learned all the cool things not to do. I learned how to be a better coach. I learned how to do content. I learned all that stuff. And if those guys wanted to come back and coach for me, they didn't stab me in the back or anything, I'm sure. But I would ask them very clear questions like, what are you trying to get out of this? Right? So that we can serve each other's needs clearly. Right? Our collaboration right now, for instance, you know what I want to get out of this. I want to coach, make money at it, and grow it so large that I leave an impact before I'm dead. I want to leave a legacy, right? And you also know that I'm running my own channels and all my own social media, and I'm going to repurpose content and all these things. Like, all these things are very clear, right? I am pro Limitless for sure, but you also know that I have all these other goals in mind, and you've taken them into account because we were communicative and honest and authentic with each other. We thought, you know what, this could work, and it could also work in this way, right? And I think that's what real, long-lasting communication does for relationships. Is it allows us to take the good with the bad as far as distortions and deletions and all the confusion stuff, and put it all out on the table. We both kind of understand it. I know your goals, you know my goals, and we can also find co-opting goals, right? And that, before I go long-winded off on a dating analogy, I'll end it there, and then might circle back.
I mean, that was very well summarized, so I don't really know what to add to this. I'll just say that it's kind of like this. In pretty much every relationship that doesn't go the way you want, like what's the percentage of situations where people say, "Oh, I knew it"? Like, think of your last romantic relationship that didn't work, and you were like, "Oh, I knew there were these red flags all along. I just ignored them." Or then there was like the business partnerships where you decided to hire a business coach or something, and you're like, yeah, I knew from the beginning that something was off, but I just didn't see it back then. That's what we're talking about, is these filters. So real communication is there to clarify that in every sense, right? If there was communication first without making those assumptions about each other, and communication meaning like I'm communicating to you that I'm maybe unsure about who you are, and those are the things I need to clarify, and being clear about it. Like, women have this tendency to throw signals that something doesn't go well, but they don't necessarily clarify what they need in the moment, and you kind of have to guess, or you have to like test so many things until you figure it out. If she needs reassurance, if she needs like attention, if she needs whatever that is. In the business world, it's exactly the same thing. So you can expect to be stabbed in the back if you don't clarify everything you need with the people you're around. And that means the investors, business partners, the team, like people on your team are the ones that will slow you down the most, because they have interests and goals in mind, and you're asking them to work on something completely different. So these filters allow us to extract probably the only thing we always have control over, which is meaning in things. And when people extract that meaning and we're trying to establish a connection or a relationship based on that meaning, if we both have different meanings that don't match and click, you're expecting to have not the result you want. And that means whether you want to fuck a girl or whether you want to have like a proper investor in your company, you will have that problem at some point. So I think so that you can like go into your dating analogy, I would always go back to this concept that the more you know yourself, the more you're able to express yourself, but also the more you're able to understand how you're being received by the other person. Because obviously, the more you know yourself, the more you're able to see these things in other people, right? Like you're your own reference, and if you're aware of your filters, you can figure out or understand the filters of other people too, and that's where you can become also like very effective at communicating. Why? Because you can also understand that when you're, for example, breaking the ice with the person at a networking event or whatever, uh, you know that what you're going to say is going to go through these filters as well. If you're really good at, through experience, to see these signs. For example, I said hi and I have like, I'm here to meet you, and like, I don't know, you seem interesting, right? And they perceive it as, oh, another guy that just wants something from me. You can see that and you can calibrate. By calibrate, I'm using a technical word, but basically what it means is use the feedback that you're getting in real life to change your behavior and change your communication style. That's what it means, right? You will adjust yourself. You will be maybe like we'll talk about the strategies in other times, but you can do many things to adjust to the other person. And the thing you hear a lot in the self-help community is just stay behind what you believe and like just say what you want to say, and like if they don't comply, like that's not your tribe. I disagree. I think that in both of these situations, the art, or personally what changed for me in personal or intimate relationships, was to stop to be that selfish and try to like just say what I wanted and be like, either it hits or not, because that will eventually fail every single time. The only thing that doesn't fail is to put yourself in the place of the other person, try to understand them at least a little bit. It's called empathy. Right. Anyways, I was going again into something. I think I need slides. I think I need concept on a slide, or at least talk about something super specific. But that's for the.
I don't think so. I think this conversation is much more valuable, even to me, to watch it back than something that's kind of stuck into a box. I think the more of these we do, the more structured we're going to be, because we'll be able to talk about a particular concept. I think the first few of these, it's fine to release them out with the meandering, because that's kind of naturally how we talk anyway. So
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the content that we want to show.
I wanted to talk. You said something there about how. What were you saying? I was going off on a tangent here. Okay. You said something about what the fuck? Okay. So awareness of what other people are experiencing from you is very difficult to achieve unless you kind of know how communication gets experienced, right? And you talked about this thing where guys will say, oh yeah, just be yourself and stick to your core values and whatever. A lot of the power plays that go on with, especially between men, is okay, how do I define my dominance, or how do I define my power in this situation, and make sure that people know that I'm not to be fucked with. I'm unfuckwithable, right? But that's just like, what's the perfect pickup line that's going to get her wet? Like, it's the same problem. To be unfuckwithable is to actually be able to calibrate quickly, is to actually be able to change your mood and state so that your goals are better communicated, so that your collaboration is better communicated, and so that you're not forced into a intimidated, small thinking space. Like, if you're actually hard to fuck with, it's because you don't care about the outcome. It's because you have already been really secure in your own thoughts of it, right? And you've already communicated with yourself what your goals were in this place, and you're trusting in your ability to communicate. If you want to appear unfuckwithable, then you start doing the power plays. There's a bunch of my clients. One of them in particular, he's like real high end business dude. He owns a whole bunch of restaurants, and he respects me because he knows that I will just say whatever the fuck I want to say off the top of my head. I don't care about his money. I don't care about his status. I don't care about his ability to speak well. He's also a public speaker and a great influencer. And he likes the fact that he can be real with me and I can be real with him, and that I don't stink when he does these little power games and and things. I just understand them and I like just keep moving, right? Because I don't really care. I don't have any outcome expectations going on with this thing. We're constantly looking for ways to work together and constantly looking for ways to create more influence and all this other stuff. But we're on the same page, kind of like you and I are, where at the end of the day, we know more lives are going to change if we continue to talk because we're both world changers. Like we're going to move. And, I don't want to get anything out of that guy every time I see him. He's coming into town this weekend, actually, and I'm going to go out and hang out with him in LA. I don't give a fuck. I know that if I go hang out and I come with my best self and he comes with his best self, we're going to collaborate in a way that's going to make benefits for everybody. And whenever he's in a bad mood and he wants to, be a little snippety, and because he does a lot of TV appearances and stuff, and he gets all munched up, and you know, it. He knows that even if he's a little snippety at me, I'm not going to be like, oh well, blah blah blah. We should like nothing happens. Like whatever. I know that I can speak candidly with you, and you're going to seek a solution rather than get all offended, and the same vice versa. So, as far as the idea that, oh, if I present myself in a certain way at a networking event, and these people are going to just want to be around me, and then I'm going to get funding partner and open up new relationships and whatever. Yeah. But also the tooth fairy's going to come take your tooth and give you money.
Basically what you were saying is, when you were saying when the guys asked, like, what should I tell her for her to want to rip my clothes off? Basically, the answer is whatever she needs to hear to want to rip your clothes off. And so the only way to do that is to know and understand her. Yeah, and in order to do that, and you were talking about the business people, I had the same experience with some like 8 and even 9-figure business owners, but I'm talking like net worth individuals that told me that they have a hard time to feel really comfortable with someone in like 10 minutes or half an hour. And with me, they were already sharing like really personal parts of their lives, because I give this vibe of like, I'm stable. Like, I'm not going to overreact to anything they say. I'm not going to attach too much attention or value. And I'm also not going to try to get anything from them. I'm genuinely curious, because I am genuinely curious. So eventually, like, people ask me, like, how do you do that? Sometimes you talk, back then in dating, I remember I had this thing where, like, guys really liked, so, I mean, you know that about me and you saw that several times. Guys really liked the fact that in field or out there, I would do things that are completely out of the ordinary, like going for a makeout very fast, or like try to take everyone on the dance floor and organize like a dance party. We did that one time, I think, in Miami, which was funny. These things that are very like uncommon, and for some reason people start to react very well to that, and they make their own inference. They make their own assumptions, like, you are handsome and good looking, maybe from their perspective of themselves, but I was not. I was not in the best shape ever. Just like I didn't meet my girlfriend in the best shape of my life. I was not very fluent in English either, so it was probably not my communication skills.
It's true.
It was not.
You've always been good looking, but you've not always been great at English. I'll tell you that much.
True. But I mean, to be fair, I was not that like, I was not in the best shape. When I was like, my face is not that attractive for people. I know that because when I was like already like in throughout my entire life, depending on what shape I had critiques and comments that were pretty harsh on that, like from rejections to rejections. I don't think there was anything particular about that. The one thing that I always did was, first of all, I was always like hyper curious to see how things would work. So I was just curious about trying something genuinely to see what would happen. I was seeking feedback, right? And I was genuinely interested in the feedback. So I would just do something that was in accordance with me. How I knew myself back then is completely different than how I know myself now. But it doesn't matter. It was still like kind of real and congruent. So then I would get a real feedback on who I really am. And I was really interested in the feedback so that I can calibrate and adjust. So I would say like, oh, hey, this is what I want to do. And then I would hear, yeah, but I don't want to do it this way. Okay, what way do you want to do that? What's missing for you? And then we can just go. And it's so simple. instead of just being like, this is how I want to do it, bitch, continue, or just like, oh, you don't want to do it, oh, okay. No, there's always a way to make it work. That's a principle that I learned from you. Calibration is king. And what I got from this is that means if calibration is king, if you can always adjust to the feedback you're getting, it means that there is always a way.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? So between two humans in all contexts across the board, which is kind of the topic that we're discussing, if you know yourself so well that you're able to also read on people's, their like genuinely understand their feedback. And why you need to know yourself well is because the feedback hurts. Like the feedback is a negative feedback, especially, will immediately go into one of these internal structures that I mentioned at the beginning and go back to your self-image and how you see yourself.
Yeah.
And you're gonna make like side conclusions that are not real, or at least not verifiable. Like, oh, she said, like, I said hi and she made a weird face. Oh, that means she doesn't like me. No, it means that she was approached by 100 guys before and she has like a wall up, maybe, right? Or probably, yeah. Or like that's, you can just see, that's what I was going back to the meaning. I can be happy that a girl makes a bitch face when she sees me. I can be happy about that because I can think like, oh, well, she was approached already by many guys. Great. This is a chance for me to make a contrast and to appear different. Great. You know, I can see an opportunity in something which is always in our power, whereas most people see this as a problem, which is, for example, one of the biggest roadblocks that people have is how to start a conversation. Like with anyone. Like that's, with fear of public speaking, those are probably the two biggest things. Yeah. Why? Because the only thing that plays at that point is there is no feedback. You don't know how you're perceived. And the only thing that plays in your head is the little voice that says you're not good enough, the image you have of yourself as the failure, and the feeling you have of this is going to hurt already before it happens. So by seeking understanding of these structures, and the way we do it is very practical, like in this, even here in this conversation, we use like really hardcore technical terms to describe things that we usually teach people to feel and experience, is go back to understand yourself very well so that you can, so that yesterday we were giving this analogy, which I think was the only really good part of the conversation, about this like sending signals and trying to get like, what was this analogy?
Oh, like the handshake of a modem?
Yeah. Can you quickly like rephrase that?
Yeah, so you're too young to understand what modems are, but they used to do internet through phone lines, and they would do it through audio. So one side would send certain tones, and then the other one would receive it. And in order to know that they were receiving the communication from the sender's side, they would do what they call in the beginning a handshake. And so they would modulate tones a bunch until they found the right level. So it sounded like and when it went to white noise, then we knew that the connection was correct. And so many people are going and starting conversations going, okay, what's the line? What's the thing? What's the thing to say? Well, what's the I-axis in cue that I'm looking for, right? Even those are still one-sided, like I'm gonna blast my communication out and hope it lands, right? It's like the shotgun effect. Whereas if I'm just like, hey, what do you want to be hearing right now? What are your goals that we can kind of align with? And what do you need? Like very often the fear of embarrassment is a bigger pull than even safety in dating and with clients. So if I tell you that, oh, I don't really care about that shit, like I fucking accept people for who they are, right away, like you would not believe how many of the rich guys I've worked with tell me all about the escorts they've hired in like the first 15 minutes, right? Because, you know, they come to me talking about sex or whatever, and I'll drop little lines about like, yeah, like it's much better when you don't have to pay for it, right? And they, you know, I'm sort of inviting the vulnerability, right? But the shame that they feel, the reason I do that is because our goals align. If I teach you how to talk to people in real life, and you get away from the shame of having to hire it, and you see me as the out for that, then I'm going to keep you as a client for longer, right? Lifetime customer value. So I sort of like drop that seat on purpose and then let them know that I absolutely don't judge anything about it, right? I do the same thing with drug use. I did the same thing with cutting your family off is a big one. like, yeah, I don't talk to my mama that much, and it's not because of communication problem. It's because I need to make sure I contain my own peace. And like, oh yeah, my sister's like that, right? We're able to kind of move into that stuff, and those things serve me really well in my goals as a coach. But it also connects super vulnerably because I'm able to kind of, drop a bunch of stuff that, they might not bite onto, and that's okay. I'm not trying to force an agenda, but when they do bite onto it, I'm able to see how they're reacting, whether they're reacting with shame or whether they're reacting with embarrassment or they're reacting with pride. I had a guy, he would be like, "Oh yeah, when I went down to, I think it was Colombia, it's like I think I only spent $600. I fucked like 30 girls, man." Like, and he was like super proud of his hooker experience, whereas most guys are like super shame. I'm like, why are you talking to me then? Like, it's way cheaper to go back to Colombia than it is to hire a dating coach. He's like, "Oh yeah, but like, I kind of feel like I'm bored of that, and I want to see what it's like, like normal people, like they meet people, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, they do," and I was able to connect in that way. And so, all I was trying to say is that there's a big juxtaposition between I want to impress my agenda out into the world, and if it lands, it lands. It's a numbers game, right?
Yeah.
Right. And this is, you know, first time in a nightclub. I turn 18 and I talk to every girl there. Yeah, yeah, numbers game. Yeah, for sure. But, you know, I also ate top ramen at that time on a regular basis. Like there's levels to this shit. I think you should take over before I go crazy on the 18-year-old top ramen experience.
I think the example with the guy with the I don't know why we went on that topic, but the escorts in Colombia, I think is a great example because the like I always say, like when we were in the dating seminars, I always said to guys like, if what you're coming here for is for me to teach you how to have sex, you're not in the right place. Because I can already tell you how to do that for free. You just go to nightclubs at 4 in the morning where people go out and you talk to everyone. And if you do that consistently, you will have more sex than if you try to connect with a person, let's say, in a real normal situation. That's not why people hire us. And when I say that, immediately there is like a weight that drops because the guys are like, oh, I'm not interested in doing that. That means I'm not here for this. What am I here for actually? And they start to think a little bit and they figure out that there are other needs that are here. One of them is the need for expression. Many of these guys want to be able to express themselves no matter the circumstance. What has nothing to do with communication. Again, expression is a need. Communication is a tool. And they drop into this like really like aware mode of like, oh, so what I'm really trying to get from this is like real human connection. Oh, I want to feel valued. I want to, wow, like it just gets into this like what we were saying at the beginning. They start to understand their own motives on how they are there, and then they start to understand why their communication doesn't land. Because they're doing things against their own needs and values, and they're just trying to impress and manage the impression with the person in front of them. That's true in business too. The reason why people want our advice or my advice or whatever in the business context, it's not because they're not comfortable with doing things. I have a friend who organized last year his first ever seminar, and he was very comfortable with the concepts he wanted to teach for the 3 days of his seminar. He was just really not comfortable with the beginning, like how to start. So we went through like we had like a special extra session for that, and we went over like how he could structure his beginning and share his story at the beginning such that he can hit so many of these like test points, as we were saying, to see how the room reacts so that then he can feel very comfortable like teaching his material. And apparently it was amazing. And after the first 15 minutes, he even overdid it and he talked too much. He felt like he bored everybody and he bored himself a little bit. But the first 15 minutes were exactly as he wanted, and it accomplished the goal, which is put him in the state where he can confidently teach everything. And they made something like a 50K from that event, which initially they were intending to do zero because they didn't know what to sell, but it turned into people just coming to them for more. And he attributed that a lot to having this really good beginning where he was able to like just like relax and be super comfortable and confident because of what we worked on. And so this year he came back again because he was like, this worked so well, I want more. But I was like, okay, but this time you know how to start. And he was like, I don't even want to start the same way because this time all the people that are in the room, the 20 people that are in the room, they already know my story. Most of them were at that event. And those that weren't, like, they don't necessarily need to know that this time. They all know me much more. So we looked like, okay, how can we structure this first day so that we can create like, and his entire thing was, oh, the first day need to be around mindset, around mindset, around mindset. And I was like, okay, let me make a few suggestions. And we started to look at ways to make a real connection with the people. For example, through exercises, through making them realize things about themselves, and through really getting deep into like their motives, their needs, what they really want, very subtly through stories, through small exercises and practices. And immediately after that, he was like, oh, dude, this is the reason why it worked the first time. Not because I was talking about great concepts, but because we were able to connect really well with these people. And that created like our authority immediately in their heads, which other business people are not able to do. So what he was coming for again this time, circling back to my concept, the first time he came not because he wanted to make, his pretext was, I want to sell well. The real reason why he came is, I don't feel comfortable starting something in front of people. Like it's just my internal state. And we worked through something that gave him that confidence. This time, his real need was, and that's what I needed to identify very quickly, was not like, okay, how can I structure this even better? This time it was, I don't want to appear salesy. I want to be organic and real and have people come to me. He wanted significance. He wanted to feel important, that he has this thing that people come to him because he's so valuable. So when you identify the needs of people, you can give them what they actually need. If I started to talk about how to optimize sales processes and conversions, he would have been like, yeah, cool. I'm going to go back to doing my thing. But here I really tapped into what he came for and not what he told me at the beginning, because we had a communication around it. So even that, even as simple, like exactly. Even exactly. So even with people will express themselves, and it's your job. Like most of the time, it can be the opposite. Like if you're lucky, like it happened to me with you, for example. I came to one of our workshops and I started to express myself, and I said a lot of things about me, and you were able to like tweak that into a real communication conversation so that we can solve problems. But most of the time, if you're in this leadership position, it will happen the opposite way, meaning people will say shit, and it will be your job to take what they're saying and turn that into a communication, meaning into something that actually lands messages on both ends. Again, I don't know where I'm going with this, but whatever. This is what came.
Yeah, good story, and I think it definitely illustrated your idea of of figuring out, knowledge of self, right? Getting how you communicate yourself, what you actually want, and what your values are, is super important, right? Because that runs how you communicate. I think we'd go for on the podcast thing for an hour. I think it's a good time to cap it off, and we'll talk again tomorrow. Any of you who are still watching, thank you so much, and definitely hit like and subscribe, because if you've been here this long, you like this shit. So you get notified, click the little bell and all that bullshit. So this will probably also be on Spotify podcast. So give us stars, and most importantly, please, we have a school group community with about 300 guys in it now. They're all our previous clients, and they're all big nerds on communication and stuff. So if you go to the school community and you join up, we have some courseware there. We have some, I do calls once every couple of weeks. And most importantly, you can ask us questions, and then we'll cover them on the podcast and cover them in the video stuff. And so the more feedback we get from guys who are having real problems in the world, the better we can tailor our communication in your direction. What else? We good? Awesome. Well, I brought this for all of you.